animation teacher, and today's lesson we're going to do a bouncing ball and tail. So I'm going to open up our week 1 canvas that we created from the other video, and we're going to create a ball and tail. So the first thing I'm going to do in this node view here is we're going to create 2 drawings. So Control R, and we're going to create a ball and a tail, and we'll close that. So we have a ball. Where's my tail? Control R, tail, add and close. Alright, so we have 2 drawings I'm going to attach to the composite. Now, once again, anything to the left of it will appear above the item on the right. So I'm just going to check a couple of settings. What you want to do is under controls, you want to turn animate using animation tools off, and we'll do the same thing here. Animate using animation tools, turn it off in the layer properties. What that's going to do is it's going to allow us to create pivot points for the drawing symbol and the peg to share the same drawing pivot points. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a new color palette. I'll call this my ball underscore and underscore tail, and I'm going to create some colors. So I'll create a ball outline. I'll go with the blue ball outline, and I'll create another drawing swatch, and I'll call this ball fill. I'll create yet another drawing swatch. I'll call this tail line, and I will create a tail fill. Now I have 4 drawing colors. Actually, I'll make this tail line a little bit darker. Alright, so we'll start with our ball using our ellipse tool. I'm going to shift and hold to get the perfect circle, and I'll fill it with the paint bucket tool. Okay, now I'm going to go to my tail, and for the tail I'm going to use my rectangle tool, and I'll use my tail line, but I'm going to thin down the line a little bit. It's a little bit thick for me. So here's my tail, and I'll fill it with this. Now currently we're on the overlay art layer. It doesn't really matter, but as a habit I like to keep everything as a standard on my line art layer here. So I'll do the same thing with the ball. Under the drawing, I'm going to use the black arrow tool, Control X, and then under the line art, Control V to paste, just so that they're in my line art layer. Now I also think this is a little bit thick here, so I'll adjust the line weight there as well. Okay, so now we have our tail and our ball, but the tail I'm going to finesse it a little bit. I'm going to add some points by holding Control, and then I'm going to hold Alt and drag to create my Bezier curves. What I want to do, actually I don't need that one there. What I want to do is I want to create kind of a circle point there for my ball to basically have a rested position, and I want to give it a little poof as well here. So I'm just going to click and drag my Bezier curves, and at the end here I'll just have it kind of taper like so. Okay, you can also add some line weight by holding down the contour editor and going to the pencil editor. Now if you highlight everything here, you'll see that there's only 4 points. So if you want to create more points, just hold down Control and click for the extra points. And with these extra points, what you're essentially doing is you're going to be able to create thick and thin lines that affect the point. So using your pencil editor tool, all you do is select the points, and using your keypad up and down, you can make these points thinner or thicker to create a nicer taper. Okay, so that's what that looks like with the taper. Next, we're going to create a peg. So I'm going to highlight the tail and in the node view and hit Control P, and I'll do the same with the ball. So now we have a peg for the ball and a peg for the tail. Next, we're going to set the pivots by using the Translate tool or the Rotate tool. I like the Translate tool, so I'm going to use that, and I'm going to put the pivot at the base of the tail where it rotates. And to set the pivot, you just hit this Transform tool. So we'll do the same thing with the ball. I'm going to do the Translate tool. Now in class I put it at the base, but I think we can also put it right in the middle as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a deformer. So the deformer works like this. You select the peg of the tail. I'm just going to hide the ball here by selecting it in the node view and hitting D to deactivate. I'm going to go to the tail, and we'll zoom in a little bit so you can see here. And I'm going to hit the rigging tool. In the tool properties, you'll see we have multiple rigging modes. So there's the bone deformer mode, there's the curve mode, and the envelope mode. Today we're actually going to do a curve. You can also have it hover in the automatic mode. But just for today, we'll use this curve one here. So to use the curve, you basically just click and drag into the middle, like so. And then you go to the end and you click and drag into the middle. Once you're done with that, all you do is you hit this transform button to set it. So now you have a deformation on your tail drawing. So I'm going to undo that, and I'll show you what that looks like with the ball and what it looks like in the node view. There's your deformation. Okay, so let's start animating. Now the exposures are off, so we'll have to ensure that the exposures stay on the whole time by simply exposing it, the drawing substitution, on the first frame and the last frame. So I'm just going to delete these ones here, and I'll go right to the end, highlight it all, and hit F5. And that's going to expose the entire timeline. Alright, so I want the ball essentially to control this tail. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to create a peg, a master peg, that will control the ball and the tail. Okay, so every time I move the ball now, or the ball master peg, I'm just going to call this ball master peg, and that's going to control both the tail and the ball. Now for this master peg, I'm just going to position it in the center of the ball, because that's usually where everything turns and pivots anyway. And now we can basically start animating. The first, I'm going to collapse these layers here because we don't really need to see these, and we're not going to change much of that art or anything like that. So I'll collapse everything, and I'll hit F6 a bunch of times. When you hit F6, the box should be red. If it's not red, then it means it'll be black, and it's going to create an automatic in-between. So you want to make sure under your preferences to ensure that under the general tab you have stop motion frames, keyframes set to on. Alright, so now that we have that, I'm going to set it to the starting position. Now, what I would highly recommend is for you to do a quick sketch of your at least path of action. Add and close. So in your path of action, you can keep it nice and simple, but essentially what I like to do is use a line, and I'll just give this nice color like that. And I'm going to use my contour editor. And I'm going to create a path of action. So in class I just had a solitary jump, but I decided I'm just going to do a 2 bounce cycle here. Okay, so there's my path of action. Now the path of action we're going to utilize for the arc of the ball. Now the arc of the tail will have its own path of action. In this case, we're just going to concentrate on the ball first, so I'm going to lock the layer there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically start to key this out. So I'm going to start the ball here as my first key. Let's expose the path of action. And on my second key, I'm basically going to do an anticipation. Oh, you know what? Before we even go any further, I'm going to move the tail in front here to show you where the dot position of the ball is. And inside the ball drawing, I'm actually going to draw a dot. Let's use that. Okay, I'll just draw like this circle here. Alright, so there's the dot there. And I drew it on the overlay layer. Okay, and now in the node view, I'm going to put the ball on top so we see where the connection of the tail should be. Alright, so the next key, let me zoom in. 1s and 2s to zoom in and out, and spacebar to pan, by the way. So once I have my first key, I'm going to go ahead and start to do my antic. So actually my first key here is going to be also the landing position. In class I created a rest position, but just because we're doing a cycle now, I'm going to make this my landing position. So my landing position is going to be a bit of a squash or a stretch, and that goes into the squash here. Okay, just a little bit. And then this is going to be my tail coming in. Okay. So as it comes in, it's going to break. My next key is basically going to be a breakdown. Sorry, this antic, we could probably push a little bit more. Or squash, we can push a little bit more. So the next key is going to be essentially my my breakdown. But actually, let's do this proper. The next key will be actually the hang time, right? And this tail here will be dragging. Okay, like so. Now, once we have our 3 keys, you can go ahead and do the breakdown between the antic. There's going to be several breakdowns, your antic and your hang time. So if you press the key and hit Shift plus, you're going to create an empty frame where you can basically duplicate and create your breakdown. So here is my breakdown. It's going to be in a, whoops, it's going to be in a takeoff position like so, and the tail is going to snap on the ground. Like so. Okay, so I'm going to need another breakdown. We can stretch this a little bit more. I'm going to create another breakdown, Shift plus, and this one is going to basically help us tween into our final hang time. So this is going to tween nicely into the hang time here. So here's our tail. It's following the path of action. And here is our hang time. Our tail at this point will actually start to break. And our next key will be down here. And this will be our squash. So if you get the squash again, you'll probably want to use this. So we're going to actually take these two keys. I'm going to hold down Control, and we're going to paste them at the end. At the ends here. And I'm going to take this key and I'll put it over here to basically start the next group of cycles. Okay, so it'll be the exact same thing. Okay, now to get from here to here, we're going to need a couple of breakdowns. So Shift plus, and this one is going to start to go down. Now as it goes down, we're going to want it to kind of recover, and the tail will drag up and be all fluffy before it snaps down again. So Shift plus for another breakdown, and this is when we create our nice stretch. Now feel free to turn on your onion skin so you can see the path of action of the tail, and you can adjust it accordingly. So what I'll do here is, as it comes down, I'll probably take another breakdown here, but it's going to basically go down like that. Snap. Follow the arc. Let's keep following that arc using the tip of the tail, right? So we're just swooshing that tip of the tail here. Let's stretch that a little bit more. We'll start to break it down. Oops, sorry. Let's start to break it down here, similar to how we had it over there at the start. Okay, so here are our keys and breakdowns. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is we'll start tweening. We're probably going to need a few more breakdowns, but for now we'll just use this. Okay, so I'm going to create actually one more breakdown here. So as it slams down, we're going to continue the squish, and it's going to drag down And for that one, we can actually tween, Shift plus plus. And to tween it, you're hitting Control K. Okay, and then it snaps up like so. Now, here's the thing about tweens. When you're on the current frame and it's your antic and you want to slow into an action, you're going to punch in a number here. So essentially you're beginning to slow down at the end of your frames. So it'll be even timing from frames 2, 3, and 4, and then when you get to 4, 5, and 6, drawing number 5 will be closer to drawing number 6 than it is to drawing number 4. So that allows you to ease into your antic. Now as you go out, you're going to need another breakdown. So I'm going to F6 that. And we're going to create not so squashed, but a recovered ball here. We're going to ensure that the tail basically snaps down before getting dragged across. I'm just going to exaggerate the stretch a little bit so we can sell the arcs a little bit better, and we're going to have to create an in-between or a breakdown between here and here to smooth out the arcs. I'll turn on the onion skin so you can see what I mean. We're basically trying to get something to help us transition into this apex of a jump here. So I'm just going to position it closer to the apex, favoring it, while trying to snap the tail, or stretch the tail I should say, and lead it into the next position. So here's the next position. It's going to slowly start to break. I'm going to adjust this so it's closer to the apex again. And on this next drawing, I'm going to basically move it back. I'll create another key and reposition. So we want a slight movement there. Okay, so just to create that float sensation before it drops. So as it floats, it's going to regain a little bit of its size back again, or shape back, and the tail is going to continue to move. So right now I'm going to have it slowly start to arc up, okay, before it breaks. Okay, so I'm going to need another breakdown here to help me get out of this. So you'll see when I click on the drawing, it's magenta. I'm trying to parent up to the ball here, so I'm moving the pegs. So I'm hitting B to parent up. Alright, so at this point, this tail is starting to whip around because of the speed slowdown that's happening here. Okay, and then now, this should actually be like this. It's going to start to whip back down. And we have one more breakdown here. Okay, just move this up a little bit. So this is going to be our transition to the bottom landing position here. It's still going to be stretched, but we're going to try to use it to soften up the landing here. Okay, and then we get back to our first frame there. Okay, so I'm gonna play this. Let's see how it looks like. I'll set it to loop. Okay, so there's our ball jump. Now, the way Harmony works is it's a little bit different than Flash. Basically, once you have a moving cycle, I'm just going to hide, actually I don't need to hide my path of action. What I'm going to do is now I'm going to create a move peg. So on top of the master peg, I'm going to hit Control P, and I'm going to name this move peg. Okay. Now with this move peg, obviously I'm going to actually, it doesn't even matter where you put your pivot point here, but I'm just gonna hit F6 here, and what I'll do is, since I know that this landing position is where it cycles back here and here, all I'm gonna do is I'm going to take this and replace the last frame with the black frame there, and I'm going to do it again and one more time. So essentially, I'm going to play this. What you get is a loop of it going from the start to the end to the start to the end. Sorry, let me expose all of that actually. Okay, same thing. Now the only difference is we have a move peg now. So whenever we get to the next in this case, next cycle, which is this black dot here. So it goes from here and it pops back. What I'm going to do is, while I have the move peg on, I'm going to hit F6 and I'll turn on my onion skin, and I'm actually going to move everything into the position of where I want that landing to be. Okay, I'm going to hide my path of action for a second so you can actually see what's going on here. Okay. So it pops back again here. So I'm going to take this move peg here, and I'm going to move the animation onto the next landing position. Okay, I'll turn off my onion skin so you can see the results of that. And at this point it goes off screen, so let's just end our animation there on frame 49. Okay, so let's check this out. Okay, so it's kind of like a little bunny hop going across the screen here. So that's basically how I like to animate my scenes. I'll show you the onion skin on this again, and it's important to note two things. The first is the path of action. You want to maintain the center of the ball action in your path of action. The other path of action occurs with the tip of the tail. So you can see that the path of action is created with the whip action once the tail changes direction and it whips out of it and it starts to arc and exits its position again. Okay, so it's there's two changes of there's two path of actions that we need to follow, one for the ball and one for the tip of the tail. And if you want to toggle on and off the controls of the deformer here, all you have to do is click the tail and hit this button right here. It's called the show selected deformers, and you'll be able to control it. But sometimes it's annoying to look at when it is activated and you want to see your animation. So I'm going to go ahead now and delete this. Actually, you know what we can do? What we can do is, because it's drawn on the overlay layer, we can simply go into our drawing and under the drawing tab, deactivate the overlay art layer so we don't see it. It's still there, but I'm just going to hide it. Okay, and also you can put the tail in front or behind by doing that. Now, remember I was telling you guys in class about the running man? Well, if you want, this is the time to show you how to use it. When you turn it off, you can essentially enlarge or shrink your entire animation right? You can move everything. So if this move tool, I want to move it up here, it's going to move all the move tools, so it jumps in the distance. So this is a handy tool for you to use if you don't want to affect your animation. Or if you want to, I should say, affect all of your animation at the same time. Okay, so I'll leave that there. Now you can also turn on this camera mask, and this will give you a preview of what you're going to see. So at this point, if you want, you can actually draw a head and a body and make it like a little squirrel jumping across the screen. So that's the ball and tail assignment. Okay, I hope that's been informative. There was lots going on, so if you didn't catch anything, just rewind it and watch it again. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.